Those who have been or currently are in the foster care system, what do you wish people knew? Foster care was fine. It's after you leave it that is hard. Being a new adult with absolutely nobody to guide you. You want to move, you have no help. A crisis comes up, you have nobody to call. Nobody to help you figure out anything about jobs or apartments or bank accounts or insurance. No mom or dad to lend you $20 when your paycheck isn't going to last until next payday. You are sent out on your own, 18 years old, completely alone and no idea how anything works in the world. It's terrifying. I second this entirely. My entire adult life has been spent fearing homelessness. One bad thing happens and I have no one to fall on to help me. Due to an ugly custody battle between my parents, my sister and I spent a short time in foster care, about a year, and I was 3 when I was put in foster care, my sister a little older. I was in my potty training days and my foster parents made me wear diapers 24/7, and whenever I used the bathroom in my diaper they rubbed it in my face like I was a dog. Then also while I was there I got chicken pox really bad and they refused to take me to the doctor or get me any kind of cream to help the itching. Just let me suffer. I'm so sorry you went through that. I personally am not a foster child, but my dad and stepmom did foster care. I've had over 100 foster siblings over the years as a result. Some they've adopted, a few aged out, and most were placed back into their homes or with other relatives. From my perspective, the worst thing is when crappy parents hang on to their rights and get their kids back. They clean up their act just well enough in the state's eyes, but really nothing has changed. The kids then wind up back in the system, or even more fricked up than before. Some parents really do change for the better and become fit to parent. It's just the ones who don't that make it hard to watch. My wife and I recently got our first foster care placement about 3 weeks ago. It's been a short time, but this has been the best and most fulfilling experience of my life. My little foster daughter is such a wonderful, strong little girl, and I am happy to be able to provide her with a safe and loving home. This is the first time in her life she's lived somewhere and not had a lot of other kids around, and I think she's really flourishing with the one-on-one attention. I was in foster care for about a year, and one thing I wish more parents knew is patience is so important for some children. A lot of us come from troubled pasts, and trying to immediately force change, whether it be things like schedule or behavior, can do so much more harm than good, and getting frustrated with us isn't helping much either. Oh man, my foster home had chores and structure, and shared my room with 3 other girls all under the age of 8, and somehow because I was the oldest it was my job to make sure they kept our room clean. I reacted really poorly to it all. I was in and out of foster care as a teen, 21 now. I wish people knew how incredibly difficult and lonely life can be when you age out of the system or reach adulthood. I was lucky enough to go to college and have most of my expenses paid for, but it was really hard to navigate college and find support systems because colleges aren't really equipped to handle kids like us. I always appreciated the adult mentors that tried to treat me like their daughter and the friends that invited me to spend time with their families, as long as it wasn't out of pity. I had to leave college last January. I was 2 years in, for a plethora of reasons. Hopefully one day I'll get to go back. The college graduation rate for former foster youth is incredibly low, and I want to give kids a little hope that they're more than a statistic and their story is still unwritten. Some farmers use foster kids as essentially slave labor. I was one of those kids. I got up at 4:30 AM to go round up the cows off the 180 acres and get milking started before I could get ready for school. In summer it was the same except full herd milking and more chores all day. Couldn't ever go anywhere and smelled like dung all the time no matter how much I showered. Hated it, ran away, but social services brought me back. I did learn a good work ethic though. My sister is a foster parent. She said that the episode of The Simpsons where they have to go to parenting classes to get the kids back is closer to reality than you think. Foster care and being in the system doesn't mean you live in a foster home. At 8 I was taken away from my parents who were drug addicts. I've lived with my grandparents since, and legally, I will always be considered a foster child and in custody of the state. I'm not in a foster home, and never have been in one. In Australia we call this family care, when you're placed with family members instead of strangers. I think it's still under DCP, Department of Child Protection, but has different policies attached. A lot of people who don't want to have their own children decide to foster and have no idea what they are getting into. A foster kid is not at all like having your own baby. Foster kids have issues. They have no sense of safety or stability. It takes a long time to build trust with them. They act out over the craziest crap. But on the flip side, a lot of people act like all foster children are going to burn their foster parents alive or something, and in most circumstances that is not the case. They are children. They are confused and lost and alone. They are not psychopaths by default. I was a foster kid from 616 and no one I talk to now has any idea what foster care is like at all. In the system from 418 years, the stigma I can't stress enough. It's not our fault we are here. I can't tell you how many people treated me like it was my fault that I was a foster kid. I'm 34 and still dealing with issues that occurred while I was in care. Shoots rough AF. When my mum was a kid, her family, both parents, my grandparents, and her 5 siblings, 8 in total in one house, fostered a boy. They took him in every couple of weekends and over the holidays. Got along well with the only son in the family. Nothing bad ever happened. My grandparents wanted to adopt him, but once his sister was old enough, I guess she took him out of foster care because they weren't able to look after him anymore. Cut to 2 years ago. 30ish years later, Mum and I were watching a program about people finding lost family on social media. You can guess what happened then. A couple of weeks later, they all had a family reunion and recounted stories from those days. He had never forgotten them all either and was still ever so grateful to this day for them. You never know what small difference you can make in someone's life at a young age. I was in foster care from age 4 until age 10. For me it absolutely sucked. You could tell the families were just in it for the checks. I was with 4 families total. The foster care system in Tennessee even separated me and my 2 sisters. I was finally adopted at age 11 and I love my family to death. It bothers me immensely how much it costs to adopt somebody. The system is completely broken. I went into foster care at 17. My parents packed my clothes for me and the only thing I had taken with me the morning I left home for that day was my guitar. They just threw some stuff in a box and covered it with glitter. My foster mom took me the next day to the most expensive store in the Mall of America I've ever been in, just to get me socks and underwear after I tearfully had to tell her I had no underwear but the ones I had on. It was the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for me, and I am super grateful. I wish I could remember her name, just to tell her how amazing that was because I didn't know how to express it in the moment. If you ever read this, foster mom, thank you. I think of you often and hope you are doing well. It sucks. A lot. The biggest thing I hated the most was the complete lack of freedom or decisions in my life. Got booted to other places or wasn't allowed to do anything. Just doing normal things were basically out of the question most of the time due to lack of money or a ride or the placement just saying no. It's great to be out. Plus they give me money now. That foster kids are usually more well behaved than normal kids. If you are in a normal family and you mess up, you would maybe get your video games taken away or grounded. If you mess up in foster care you get to move your whole entire life. A foster home is nothing like a regular home and abuse runs rampant. Turning 18 can seem like a death sentence. I'm in foster care because my mother left me early this year, but I've been given the choice to stay with my uncle, so my experience isn't that bad, but I will say sometimes you feel like you're all alone and that you have lost everything, so the slightest affection or compliment can brighten my day sometimes. I know it's not the same as having people right there with you, but when you're feeling alone, just remember you have all your friends on Reddit and there's always someone here to chat with or lend an ear. Not a foster care kid, but worked in group homes with former foster kids, and the number one thing that shocked me was how much abuse and neglect occurred in foster care. And this is with kids who've been pulled from their families by CPS for the same reasons. A lot of good foster parents are out there, but a lot also seem to take advantage of the fact that there aren't enough of them, so oversight seemed, to me, spotty at times based on my clients' files. I wish people would stop telling foster kids that families are great, and that family is everything. You can only count on your family, blah blah blah. It made me sick when people used to say stuff like that, as if I didn't just leave a horrible excuse for a family, or that my family most definitely isn't everything, since I can't count on something that fell apart. I don't have much to contribute except the culture shock. Going from inner city filled with blacks and Puerto Ricans to a farm town all white school. I was only 11 but their household rules were completely different back at home. Could not eat whenever you wanted. Couldn't go outside whenever. Didn't have a TV and couldn't watch whenever. Hobbies went from basketball and football to NASCAR and hockey. We went camping. I could honestly say that foster care was one of the best times of my life. I'm not a foster kid but my mom works as one of the people who help place kids into homes and the such. My mom also visits homes and evaluates if kids need to come into foster care. Sometimes she comes home crying and just hugs me saying that she loves me. Based on this I can determine that foster kids have it rough. And I truly feel sorry for them. Sometimes when they have nowhere to go they come and stay in my room with me. There was one boy who showed me all of his scars and everything. I had asked him what his ankle bracelet was and he explained that his mom couldn't get him to school so he had to wear it to prove where he was. I really do feel sorry for everybody in the system. I just now noticed how much of me looking down upon you guys this is and I don't want it to look like that. You aren't looking down, you are just an empathetic and emotionally mature, at least in this area, teenager. Don't try to act overly motherly or fatherly. This means something totally different to some of us. Sometimes the people who bore us aren't fit to raise us and that can really screw with integrating into society. Calling God our Father is a scary thing. Saying you're going to mother me brings on a fear response. Take your time with wounded animals and wounded children. I was a foster parent for 11 years, all teen girls. Most of my kids still call me dad, and I haven't been one since 2010. I hope I did things right. We're just as confused and frustrated by the system as our kids. I wouldn't trade my time as a foster parent for anything. My foster mom was a lovely human for a while. She had a tendency to marry total abusive jerks but I always knew she cared about me until she got back on drugs and took off on the run with a felon that tried to choke my foster sister to death. She planted drugs on my foster dad which got him sent back TK prison and she left me with 4 minor foster siblings, all her biological kids, to care for until the system took them too and ironically enough put them in foster care as well where I wasn't allowed to see them. I lost my biological family and then I lost my foster family, so making connections with others is hard. At a performance review for my last job I was told that I come across as fake, superficial, and closed off which is detrimental to my job performance. The boss said I am perfectly nice and pleasant to work with but it's obvious that I have no intention of connecting with others around me. I haven't been in foster care in over 10 years but I am still affected by those experiences in a way that is obvious to others. I'm also too old to blame foster care for crap but it never really goes away. I miss my foster siblings and think of them as family but they don't think of me as a part of their family, just the kid their mom took in. As others have said the hardest thing outside of the emotional stuff is just not having a safety net of any kind. I had to teach myself everything about adulting. For example, my partner and I bought a $300 car at a tow auction and would teach each other to drive at 3 AM illegally with the driver's handbook and a flashlight. A lot of times I still feel like I'm doing it wrong and while I'm starting to build a professional life I'm always terrified of fricking it up, of becoming homeless or missing payments on my bills. Because if I did mess up somehow it's over. There is no one to call. There is no help. Family is also this giant gaping hole in my life. I don't want to become a jaded bitter butthole but like holidays are hard. I have nowhere to go. I have no one that wants me. I never had a wedding because who would I invite? No one came to my college graduation. There is no financial or emotional support but really, there just isn't anyone. I would kill to know what it feels like to have a relationship with people that love and feel connected to me. I would love to not spend every Christmas eating Chinese food alone. That amongst these heroes thrive a population of some of the worst predators I have ever encountered. That CPS is a crock of bulls without pity and without remorse. They don't protect, they facilitate and systemize the abuse. I was orphaned at 7 and I was stolen from my loving caring grandparents because it was profitable for these people to do so. It's completely common to lose all your belongings because you live out of a trash bag. Most foster parents treat the kids like property that they can pass on when they are tired of dealing with the kid. Out of all the homes I was in, there was only one that did it for the kids. The rest did it for the paycheck or the opportunity access to underage children to touch. It's a twisted system that covers only itself when the truth comes out. 2. Went from being in a foster home to being homeless on my 18th day. From age 8, I knew what it was like to be alone in the world with no support. I reconnected with my birth father and he felt no remorse for the way my life was affected by his poor life decisions. One thing I never thought I'd have to deal with was love interests and girlfriends leaving me due to my lack of family for them to be a part of. Worst part, as kid was feeling like a second income for the foster family. Couldn't eat dinner with them. Had to sit on the dining room floor to watch TV while their family was in the living room together. That is rage inducing. If those people are patting themselves on the back for being foster parents, they shouldn't be. For me personally, it was the culture shock. To go from a family who was emotionally and physically abusive to a family that would sit down and talk about how they were feeling and be supportive was so drastic. It took me a while to actually be able to fully express how I was feeling, but luckily they were super supportive and patient with me. When someone is private about their younger years past, don't push boundaries. If there is something to be known, trust that when the timing is right, it will come out. It's not always that people are ashamed, scared, troubled or whatever. Like previous responders have said, at the end of the day we only have ourselves. Sometimes people just want to go with the flow of life. Side note, I don't speak for everyone. TLDR. Sometimes people seem very private. It's not always a bad thing. Just give it time. Growing up in foster care can be challenging. Some foster care are good, and some are bad. I lived in the foster care long enough to know that so many people get involved in fostering for the money and not to make a lasting impact on a child's life. But I had a few good short-term, or respite, foster parents, and they are the ones who are still in my life today. My advice to anyone going through the foster care system is to utilize the services offered to you. Counseling is beneficial, and although different cultures speak against emotional therapy, it can have a major impact on success after care. For me, I would never talk to anyone and I channeled my anger through defiance and opposition. My life could have turned out differently had I not made the best of the better circumstances. Had I not kept in contact with those few good apples, I could have become a victim of the system but instead remained victorious. Today I am an undergraduate at the University of Alabama, majoring in social work. I hope to earn my Master of Social Work degree and do some public speaking and coaching for teenagers in foster care. I want to show them that no matter where they came from, they can succeed. I'm one of the very lucky ones. I was in a foster home for a very short time and was very young when adopted. But it's not all butterflies and rainbows and wow, I have a family is all amazing all the time. I deal with attachment issues. I struggle with the idea of my bio family suffering or worse, the idea that I wasn't wanted or that I was possibly stolen. Some places will take children from their mothers and claim they were stillborn to sell them to foster agencies and such. The worst thing is that I have no idea how I was conceived, and while most people wouldn't want to know, I had to come to terms at a very young age that my mother may have been violated. I pray not, but that's the reality. I've had it a lot easier than my fellow fosters and adoptees who've been in the system for years, but the problems and issues doesn't stop when you get adopted. Been part of the foster system since I was 11 and now I work for the system. I grew up being the worst human to everyone else around me. In grade 12 my volleyball teacher sat me down and was the first person who believed in me. He was the first one to tell me I wasn't destined for the life my parents laid out for me and that I had the potential to be a leader. I just graduated university and now going for my masters, and that man changed my life just by believing in me, and it wasn't immediate. I pushed him away because that's all I knew, but he stuck with me, and that's what it took, someone to see past my behaviors and to encourage me even through the rough times and not just give up right away because I messed up, which was a lot. When I was in the foster care system, the biggest thing I've learned was how lonely it can be sometimes, no matter how welcoming and including the family is. When I was placed with my family, I knew right away I got lucky to have them. but there were moments when I felt super lonely and left out. Family parties is the worst for me because there would always be someone who wants a family photo and would ask me to take it while everyone else gets to be in it. Or when my parents would introduce my siblings as my daughter or my son while I'm this is crew G. It sounds silly, but it was always the subtle things that made me feel left out. Fortunately, they ended up adopting me and my parents were chosen to be flown out to Washington DC to be filmed in a video about the importance of fostering and adopting. They were also interviewed to be in an article for a website. Above all, I've never taken my family for granted and I'm proud to be their son. They've changed my life and hopefully one day I can return the favor. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk about this. I'm about to remind my family how much they mean to me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.